Hello. I'm going to look today at the teaching of Pope Francis on justice and peace matters in three separate parts. In this, the first of three videos, I want to look at the background of the teaching of Pope Francis in matters related to justice and peace. In the second video, I look at three important documents issued by the Pope: Evangelii Gaudium in 2013, The Joy of the Gospel, which we can say dealt with the repairing of the church; Laudato Si in 2015, which dealt with repairing the planet; and Fratelli Tutti of 2020, which dealt with repairing humanity. I've also looked at some of the Pope's other statements to work out what his teaching is saying about shaping our world to be more just. I'll explain how the application of his teaching can transform lives in the third and last video. It's important to stress where the Pope is coming from in building up a picture of his teaching. Some people, including a cardinal or two, have accused him even of heresy because he couches his thoughts in the promotion of the documents of the Second Vatican Council. The Italo-American theologian Massimo Fagioli wrote that the groups which oppose Pope Francis equate Vatican II with the selling of our Catholic identity and the weakening of the sense of the tradition, by which, of course, they mean a tradition stuck in the 19th century. In fact, the Pope shows us within the tradition of the Council, first, that the reign of God announced by Jesus is a living and dynamic reality. He says in the preface to a book soon to come out in English on his social teaching that Jesus invites us to conversion, asking our faith to emerge from the stasis of an individual religiosity or from its reduction to legalism, to become a faith that calls each of us to cooperate in the work of God in different situations of life and society. Pope Francis says we must never neutralize this social dimension of the Christian faith, since the kerygma, or proclamation of the faith itself, has a social dimension, meaning that the life of society will be a setting for universal fraternity, justice, peace, and dignity. The second aspect that he shows us is the importance of the Second Vatican Council that Pope Francis is trying to advance in the Church 5 decades after it finished its work in bringing the Church up to date and emphasizing its role in not hating the world, but cherishing it and trying to instill in it Christian values. He thinks back to his student days as a Jesuit novice, when, as he writes, the Council became the horizon of our belief and of our ways of speaking and acting, becoming our ecclesial and pastoral ecosystem. The Council had simply entered our way of being Christian and our way of being church. I suppose many of us were brought up in this way. I certainly was, under the influence of Scottish Dominicans such as the late Anthony Ross OP, and of Scottish Jesuits such as the late Jerry Hughes SJ, author of the spiritual classic The God of Surprises, and the chaplain at the University of Glasgow when I was an undergraduate there many moons ago. The open church and dialogue with the world featured in the Council documents has to be expanded to putting itself, in the Pope's words, at the service of humanity, taking care of creation, as well as announcing and working to realize a new universal sisterhood and brotherhood in which human relations are healed of egoism and violence and are founded instead in reciprocal love, welcome, and solidarity. I want to now look at integral human development. If you look up the website of the dicastery, or the ministry, which deals with justice and peace matters in the Vatican, you'll notice that it has changed its name. Pope Francis has renamed the former Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace to the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, subsuming other dicasteries for charity, refugees and migrants, and healthcare under its name, as a sign of the significance he places in integral human development for solving global poverty and the desecration of the planet. In the document setting up the dicastery on the 17th of August in 2016, Pope Francis said that in all her beings and actions, the Church is called to promote the integral development of the human person in the light of the gospel. To do this, he has said it will be competent particularly in issues regarding migrants, those in need, the sick, the excluded and marginalized, the imprisoned and the unemployed, as well as victims of armed conflict, natural disasters, and all forms of slavery and torture. I think there were two good reasons why the Pope did this, one seemingly trivial and the other more profound. The seemingly trivial reason was that he knew that the various dicasteries were often jealous of one another's work and would try to undermine one another. By bringing them all under one roof, he eliminated competition. The more profound reason was that, as he said at a conference to commemorate St. Paul VI's encyclical on human development, Populorum Progressio, published in 1967, integral development is the path of good that the human family is called to follow. But what did he mean really by this? Well, integral human development in the teaching of Pope Francis is central to his thought. The most consistent elaboration of the term, integral human development, by the Pope, is found in his address to participants in a congress organized by the revamped dicastery to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Populorum Progressio in April 2017. In the Pope's opening address, he expands on what he thinks integral human development means today and highlights 5 main points, which I'd like to summarize. Pope Francis is emphasizing that each person is part of a community and the human family, regardless of race or creed. The human person should not be exploited by economic or political forces. The gap between the rich and the poor has to be narrowed. All dimensions of life have to be integrated into a whole which works for the common good, and development has to take on board that the majority of human beings, at least in the global south, what we used to call the third world, have a faith tradition whose religious values have to be taken into account. Pope Francis also described elements of integral human development on the global stage of the UN General Assembly in September 2015. He strengthened some of the themes such as participation, the means to live in dignity, the environment, the link to the sacredness of all life, and the avoidance of war. He continued his theme about the poorest, who are, in his words, cast off by society, forced to live off what is discarded, and suffer unjustly from the abuse of the environment. They are part of today's widespread and quietly growing culture of waste. In terms of participation, he insists that for people to be enabled to escape from extreme poverty, they must be allowed to be dignified agents of their own destiny, because integral human development must be built up and allowed to unfold for each individual, for every family, in communion with others, and in a right relationship with all those areas in which social life develops: friends, communities, towns and cities, schools, businesses, unions, provinces, and nations. Regarding the environment, Pope Francis also reflects in his message some of his insights expressed in Laudato Si, published 4 months before his UN speech. The message adds nuclear disarmament, climate change, the destruction of biodiversity, and the sacredness of life of both humans and other creatures to the advocacy agenda of the Church. Pope Francis includes peacemaking and reconciliation in development practice in the field, as well as listing those on integral human development approach as first to consider the poorest in the guise of the discarded and unborn, not just the poor who are living invisible. Pope Francis's own cry for the poor reaches fever pitch in his Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, which together with Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti we'll look at in the next video.